This chapter starts off with the Master having a dream where Merlin is talking to them and telling them about the legend of the Child of Prophecy, foreshadowing the Master's involvement and the role of an important character moving forward. The Master wakes up and there's an alarm going off. Foe decides not to come with us for some strange reason. Going to the command center, it's revealed that Novum Chaldea has actually been ignoring the British Lostbelt for the time being because it lost its tree of emptiness, making it not a threat at the moment. Since 3 weeks have passed since Heinkyo, they were going to go to the 7th Lostbelt, but things have changed, with the world going up in smithereens in 24 hours if the British Lostbelt collapses. Thus, it is now a priority of ours to get rid of it before that happens. On top of that, Sion wants us to make a deal with the Lostbelt King to get access to Rango Minia's power or something similar to that of a divine construct, because it will be good against the alien god. The group gets close to the Lostbelt, but something goes wrong. Nemo and Sherlock Holmes are feeling strange. The closer they get to the Lostbelt, we find out that this land rejects proper human history heroic spirits, and thus special cases like MASH being a demi-servant and Da Vinci being a homunculus made by the original servant Da Vinci being the only ones who aren't affected. We also find out the stormwater technology has shut down, and the closer they get, the worse it gets, meaning the shadow border is also not in a good situation to be used. Thus, they need to find another method to transmit information from one team to the other, and Da Vinci decides to use carrier birds. Gordolf gives us a time limit of 45 days, since going into the Lostbelt gives us more time to actually work. They could push it to a few more days, but at the moment it's best to stay within this safer margin of time. The group lands on a shore filled with fog, surprised to see that Tristan has suddenly appeared. He doesn't know why he was summoned, assuming that because connection to the land being from Cornwall, meaning we can theoretically summon other Round Table Knights or King Arthur because they have a connection to this land to some extent. That's when we run into these black creatures that will later be known as Moors. They're able to fight back the creatures, but because they've been in the fog for too long, everyone starts to forget who they are, running off, getting separated. The Master ends up waking up, forgetting who they are, and when they see Caster Artoria, they think they're MASH, and thus she ends up going by MASH for a little bit. The Master, with their name written on a leaf, being either Hermea or Lysander, based off of characters from A Midsummer's Night Dream, is confused about what's going on. We also have a Tristan, who has also written his name going by Tristram, also having his name written on a leaf by some unknown individual. In the city of Cornwall, we found the people here are actually rejects or outcasts who could not pay the annual existence tax from Morgan. At first, they don't know what to do with us, but eventually welcome us happily, seeing us as outcasts too. Due to some things that happened in the past, creating the nameless fog, Morgan does not lay foot in this place, thus it is safe for anyone who is trying to escape her watchful eye. Castoria explains to us about some of the clans, with the Wing clan being one of the more humanoid ones who are known for being peaceful and rational. The Earth clan, who are stout and stocky, are the hardest workers and they make things like roads and buildings. The Fang clan are beast-like and are responsible for being the key fighting force. In the past, if it weren't for them, the fairies might not have survived. Then we have the Wing clan and the mysterious Mirror clan, both who are either scarce or have gone MIA. Then we have the King clan, which only has one member in it that has survived, that being Nocnera, who is known for being a troublemaker and a queen bee type. In the camp, we are assisted by a nameless female fairy, and we end up saving her while in the woods being attacked. And sadly, we see that a piece of her eye has fallen out, and she is becoming a Moors, having lost her purpose and name for so long that she can't can't even remember what she was supposed to do the previous night. Because we're human, of course we get hungry, and because we say that, the fairies end up realizing we are actually an unregistered human, and they want to eat us. The thing about fairies is, while they can eat and sometimes enjoy doing so, they don't need to eat. So servants can easily get away with being fairies because they also do not need sustenance to survive. But before they eat us, they plan to fatten us up a bit before deciding who gets what piece of us. They eventually start fighting over who gets what and how much they get. But that fairy that we saved before actually helps us escape, and in the process, she eventually turns into a Moors, and we are forced to fight her. When the fight is over, Oberon deals the final blow so we don't have to, and the master finally remembers who they are, what they're here to do, and the person that we've been calling Mash reveals to us that they are in fact the Artoria of this Britain. Elsewhere, the real Mash and a white wolf are found outside Nameless Forest, and since she does not know who she is, they decide to call her Annis for the time being. They considered selling her, considering she might sell for a high price, considering she looks like a knight, has iron equipment which is quite rare at this moment due to a band Morgan actually put on it some time ago, and on top of that, she's human, and humans are considered a commodity to fairies. Outside of Nameless Forest, Oberon tells us that the ruler of this Lostbelt is Morgan. When we enter the city of Salisbury, Artoria informs us about important concepts we should understand while navigating this Lostbelt. One is that fairies have a purpose and they come to existence to serve said purpose, while we have humans that exist but they are slaves. They are not free unless they earn their freedom and become independent humans. Not that that means much in the grand scheme of things, but it's important to know, since Artoria is essentially going to be playing the role of our owner to help us get around. Since fairies are the dominant species here, it is quite odd that there's a lot of human things in this city, and that's because fairies have imitated human society on a surface level because they do not understand the nuances, substance, or even meaning behind why we have things that we do. As a species that doesn't have to worry about some of the things humans do, it's understandable. We go to a pub that Oberon visits a lot, and he is welcomed by many fairies who remind him of his debt, since he is low on funds at the moment. We see Da Vinci, who is serving as a waitress. Up in one of the rooms, Da Vinci tells us that unlike other Lostbelts, Lostbelt Britain does not have a society that is built upon humans, where all the others, to some extent, were some sort of evolution of human society that we could have taken. Even the Yaga from Lostbelt 1 fit this bill. In this world, within the Lostbelt, there are no continents or other nations outside. It is only Britain, making it more like a separate world than a route human history could have taken. We also find out that Morgan uses command spells on fairies as a way to force them to donate some of their vitality to her, aka their magical energy, the thing that sustains them. This is called the existence tax, and if you can't pay the existence tax, then in most cases death awaits you. This shows that she is a simple follow the rules type of ruler. Nothing's personal, she's just doing what she has to do, that she believes will help run her country the way she wants it to go. Finishing up our conversation, Oberon reveals that Artoria is the child of prophecy, but Artoria is ignoring this because she lacks the power or confidence that she can do anything. Since fairies can judge based off magical energy, she of course doesn't seem like the fabled child of prophecy that will stop the queen. Oberon decides to use the connections to get an appointment with Aurora, a fairy who will be very important for the future. Thanks to Oberon, we get in, but her attendant Coral, having her own views of weak fairies and humans, tells the guards to take us away. But we do end up fighting and showing that we are not as weak as she initially thought But meeting Aurora, we find out that she has a tendency to take in humans that she finds interesting, and she does it a bit too much. From Oberon's perspective, they asked her if she can help them find MASH, and she agrees, offering her assistance using her wind fairies throughout Britain to inform them if they find anyone that matches the description. Oberon then blurts out that Artoria is the child of prophecy, and Aurora believes it, but can't let us go to the bell yet because we haven't proved ourselves. Artoria has to at least do something like beat the calamity of Norwich before she can do so. A little later, Oberon tells us that from the intel he got from his Moth Blanca, that another child of prophecy is said to have appeared, this being MASH, and that they are going to Norwich. This worries Oberon because he thinks that the people of this Lostbelt are going to deny the real child of prophecy in favor of the one that they think is a better fit. But because we're not exactly ready for that type of challenge yet, we should lay low for now. Oberon gives them a message to assist a fairy woman who is actually being attacked by crows, so we make her a scarecrow because her method to stop them was to talk to them and ask them nicely to leave. The conversation eventually leads to talking about the fairy knights, or the localization being Tam Lin. And because things are now looking worse than they expected, they decided to finally tell Artoria a bit about proper human history, since now they have to try to contest with the Tam Lin, aka Fairy Knights. It's revealed that the Fairy Knights, unlike other fairies, are actually immune to the Moors, which is why they are perfect for fighting them. A bit shocked at what she was hearing, she actually tells them about Fairy Knight Tristan, and how she is known as a fairy killer, and how he was worried that our Tristan would actually be more like her, but she's happy that he wasn't. Later that night, Tristan and Artoria talk, and he gives her some words of encouragement. We find that Coral has actually visited us, telling the group that they found someone who might look like MASH, who had recently been sent to the human ranch. On the way to the ranch, we're told about Percival, the only human to reach the level of a fairy knight, having contested against the strongest Lancelot, and was offered a chance to be an actual fairy knight, but decided to rebel instead. When they try to enter the ranch, Artoria guides them, reassuring the group that because it's not breeding season yet, everything should be fine. But they actually get caught by a surprise and have to face against some of Morgan's knights, who Artoria thought was actually a fairy knight, but no, they were just a normal one. Sadly, they are forced to escape when the rebels join in because they're neither on Morgan or the rebellion side, and they don't want to get stuck in between. Luckily, some of the humans are actually freed. Things were looking good until they're confronted by an actual fairy knight, this being Gawain, who in the fight will actually eat your command spells, making this fight not necessarily go in your favor. Our Tristan decides to hold her off, knowing that he won't win, but will give us a chance to escape at the very least. While his attack doesn't do any major damage, it does leave her a bit numb, only sending her guards to go after us. Oberon shows up with a fairy who is essentially just red hair, called Red Rabbit, who volunteers to help us escape, since there's a law that says you cannot force a fairy like him to actually help you. Back at the ranch, the fairies report back that we escaped, and one of them does mention that Gawain is the strongest fairy knight, but that's actually not true because she admits that Lancelot is not the strongest fairy knight, she is the strongest species in that Lostbelt, making it clear in the story at the very least that if they can't handle her, they definitely can't handle Lancelot. Back with Anna and the three fairies, they discuss the fairy knights and how Gawain is the most feared, Tristan is the most hated, and Lancelot is the most beautiful. The conversation is stopped when they are attacked by black dogs, who are said to be one of the most despised creatures around, trying to tell Annis to run away, but they're surprised that she was able to take them out with ease, thinking that she is the child of prophecy. The group rendezvous, and Oberon Oberon tells them what Morgan's planning to do, all the magical energy that she's taken from fairies with the existence tax. She plans to attack proper human history and replace it with a giant fairy British Isle. We see in Morgan's meeting with the clan leaders that they're discussing the going-ons of the Lostbelt when suddenly Faye Tristan appears and kills one of the guards, vocalizing her thoughts and opinions, which no one opposes or questions her actions because they are scared of her. She then mocks one of the fairies that she wounds for spilling blood in the room and then makes them throw themselves into the Great Pit, a place where no one returns from under normal circumstances, and Morgan lets this slide. Now, Woodrose has some words to say to Tristan, but he is stopped and calmed down by Gawain, who reports back about the Child of Prophecy and Chaldea. Tristan then tries to kill Spriggan, but he dodges the attack. The reason she did this was because Spriggan said the Child of Prophecy, who uses magecraft, is similar to Tristan, and there are rumors that the Child of Prophecy is Morgan's child, and Tristan is the only child of Morgan. It will never accept anyone else to have that position. We find out that in the past, Morgan used her water mirror to take down the Calamity in Norwich, which left a lot of damage, but the bell tower was unharmed, leaving the recovery operations to Spriggan, who has his own agendas for the city. The discussion eventually derails further when Beryl calls in, where we find out that he's actually going to get married to Morgan, and then afterwards Tristan wants to get married with him as well. Eventually this chaotic meeting ends and Tristan takes some verbal low blows at Vargas, considering her habit and reputation in regards to having many lovers and doing certain things with them. These comments are unwarranted but not untrue. Tristan goes back to her room looking for Beryl. Seeing that he's not there, she thinks about what's going on in the other cities and decides that she can do some plotting of her own. She was told not to do anything. Oberon with the group explains how fairies are supposed to be born from the planet. These fairies are called great fathers and mothers, acting essentially as nature gods without any need to interact with humans. For example, think of Vivian, the Lady of the Lake. Proper human history Morgan, we find out, actually got the authority of the land. So she was human. This actually makes her some sort of human fairy hybrid. It is said that fairies that come from the planet have power equal to elementals, and they are called Ares or Subbells, not to be confused with Ares from Notes. They have the ability to erect domains and making rules that must be followed within said domains, such as a character I'm going to get to real soon who has the ability to limit people down to their own natural strength, void of training or any buffs that they're getting from external sources. These fairies might even be capable of surpassing fairy knights. The group arrives in Gloucester, a city known for constant changing. Sometimes the sky has rainbows, other times boys become girls and girls become boys, as well as a variety of other things. It's a very unpredictable city. They run into a fairy who tells them about the auction that's going on, where a fairy from another world who tried to rebel against the queen is being sold. This fairy is said to have come with iron weapons, which makes the group think that this is MASH. They then decide to help a random fairy with her mice problem. In this case, the mice are just big today, and they're also dragons. Their reward for helping her is to get tickets to a new store, but we find that store has actually just closed down. But they actually bump into none other than Faye Tristan, who normally hates anyone besides her mother that she comes in contact with, but for some reason she doesn't feel angry or like killing you, though she does talk down to Artoria. Oberon regroups with the others with some tickets to the auction, not sure they have enough money to actually win who they think is MASH. Da Vinci also came with her own money money to get in on the bid and is tempted to spend the money on an unpublished Shakespeare manuscript that found its way into the Lostbelt. At the auction, when they get to the Child of Prophecy, we find out it's actually Muramasa, not Mash, who is here after having lost to Faye Lancelot. The auctioning goes a bit crazy, with Artoria going to the lengths of bidding Oberon's territory as collateral. With only two big bidders, Morion decides to step in and have Faye Tristan and Artoria fight in a battle of magecraft to see who can win. Faye Tristan ends up losing because she is using tools to use magecraft and thus ends up running out first. Of course, tries to make excuses for why she lost, but Morion stops her so that she doesn't ruin the people's faith in Morgan for making someone like Tristan a fairy knight, or Tamlin if you prefer, considering her poor performance. On top of knowing that she shouldn't even be here in the first place. Deciding to let it go, Tristan then leaves, telling Morion to come see her in Camelot as they are both lovers of art. Muramasa tells us that he was actually sent here to kill the Lostbelt King, Morgan in this case. That is when Lancelot appeared, doing some damage to him and dropping him into the Great Pit, and because of the alien god's modifications, he was able to survive and find his way out of it. That is when he got captured. Now of course Muramasa, working for the alien god, normally would have no reason to help us, but the thing is, he has no loyalty to the alien god. He's just a blacksmith that got a job and he's gonna do said job, and because we helped him, he's gonna help us back. On top of that, our goal doesn't conflict with the alien god's goal for him. The group finally meets Murian, who looks like Khazar-Drop, but just for information, she was designed to look like Khazar-Drop because she's one of the components that made Khazar-Drop. Even though Khazar-Drop was conceptualized before Murian, it's just one of those things where you have to work forward to work backwards. She is surprised to see a human from proper human history that isn't as bad as Beryl, which is why she didn't kill us on the spot, because she wants to know what we're going to do here, and depending on our answer will determine her next action in regard to what to do with us. But the thing is, we haven't decided what we're going to do completely yet, nor who our enemy is in this scenario. Seeing that Artoria is a child of prophecy, she's kind of disappointed considering her lack of power. She is surprised that we are actually not here to try to ring the bell, but to actually look for Mash, hence why they're here at the auction, and she shows her disappointment in how Morgan has run things and how things have turned out. She won't let us ring the bell though, not until Artoria is stronger or shows some form of power, be it in wealth or support. She needs to prove herself in some way to show that she's worthy. She introduces us to her guest and bodyguard, Koenskaya, who here is playing a more backseat role. And Oberon shows his blatant distaste for her, which actually ends the meeting on a more sour note. Koenskaya admits that yes, she's done some bad to warrant that response from most of the group, but not Oberon. She admits that her goal here is actually to attain her sixth tail by absorbing a large beast, since she can only hold up to 9. Back with the Masters group, we are made blatantly aware that Murian actually had no plan of working with us, and that she actually just wanted to use us if we were useful, but of course we weren't. So they decide it's best to just leave the city, but then they're confronted by some fairies who give them gifts to Child of Prophecy. Even though they don't recognize her as Artoria, she still appreciates the offer nonetheless. They then decide to go to Oberon's base to lay low, while they look for more clues to find Mash. Meanwhile, back with Mash, or in this case Anissa's group, she's presented to Bogart in Sheffield to be sold off by the 3 fairies that she has befriended on this journey. Bogart questions the fairies if they really think that she is a fairy, because he knows she's a human, she just has a lot of magical energy. On top of that, he doesn't believe in the whole Child of Prophecy thing, so he gets his guards to attack the 3 fairies, thinking he's been tricked, but Mash protects them and he finds an interest in her. Thus, she becomes his 62nd wife. This is when she's sent to Habitat so she can have a wedding dress made for her. She's also forced to throw away the name Anise because it is based after someone called Black Anise, who is a child eater, and thus she is named Mash because Habitat saw it written on her shield in chalk. Living her peaceful days in the city, she was known for her beauty and power, considered to be the real child of prophecy by the people. Bogart only saw her as someone so pretty besides him. She took to her role as a queen very well and helped the citizens against the Moors, as well as with other tasks, with Habitat by her side. When she was in the castle, she was looking up top from the walls at the sunset. That's when Bogart appeared, telling her to go back to her room so she doesn't distract the guards. He makes it clear this relationship is only for appearances, while she thinks it's genuinely a true relationship. Bogart makes it clear to her that she's a hindrance to him because to bring out his true power, he needs to be hated and people need to hate him, and Mash does not invoke any activity towards him. We go back to the first night of her as his wife, where she ended up pushing Bogart out of the castle, breaking through the walls, thinking he was going to give her a shoulder massage. In actuality, he was going to do some not okay things to her. This is one of the things that made him want to not be around her. While recognizing her strength, he doesn't want to rely on her or use her. Back in the present, we see Bogart talking to Habitat about the black barrel that Mash was found with, and if it's usable. She says it is, but by touching it, it makes her feel sick because of Fairy's natural disposition towards iron tools and potentially other metallic substances. On top of the fact that it would generally kill most fairies if they aren't strong enough to use it, since it runs off of magical energy. This inflates Bogart's ego because he believes that he is strong. Bogart decides to visit Mash and tells her about the prophecy, some of the history of Fey Britain, and his opinion of all who have been said to hold the title of Child of Prophecy or something equivalent, not believing in it in the slightest. That night, before leaving, he tells her to just do what she's doing and keep people happy and not to stand out too much, making it clear that he doesn't want her assistance in anything. One of the fairies that came with Mash, Winky, we see him selling out information about Bogart and Mash to Morgan's forces for, of course, a nice sum of money. But he stayed too long because Beryl heard everything, decided to get some more information out of him, not letting him leave until he told them everything. Back with the Masters group, we see them on the road after helping a group of Earth fairies later that night. They explain to the other members of the group about alter egos, and Ramasa explains that he is the alien god's god killer, having been mixed with other entities that do the same thing, giving him the ability to be able to cut the spirit origin of Hephaestus in half during his time at Atlantis. The group ends up going to Oberon's territory, the Autumn Welsh Forest, where they meet many nice yet strange fairies. But the happy times are halted when a group of black dogs mixed with a fairy that is overflowing with magical energy, having lost themselves and their focus to the point of losing control, similar to the ones back in Cornwall at the start. After defeating it, night falls, but the master is unable to sleep, feeling guilty about not being able to do more, worrying about Mash and Artoria. Oberon relates to this, trying to put the master at ease, and what Oberon says that he wants, besides defeating Morgan, is to find Titania. After some training against Red Rabbit, Da Vinci, and Ramasa, the master decides they don't want to just save Mash, but they also want to help Artoria, and they have the backing of the rest of the group at that moment. So the next stop is Norwich to defeat the Calamity. In Sheffield, we see Bogart commenting on how Mash hasn't come back for her black barrel, and that she is actually afraid to fight rather than her reasoning of of being afraid to hurt Britain with it, as well as the people of the land itself. It is mentioned that during the Caterpillar War, Morgan showed fear for once, which is very odd knowing her. This is when Vargas was named Gawain during the conflict, and seemingly Mash is similar to a young Gawain, too afraid of her own power. Preparing for battle, they're surprised by a sudden attack from all 3 fairy knights. But before they commence the battle, Gawain tries to negotiate, telling Bogart to just surrender and open the gates, but Bogart obviously rejects the offer and the battle starts in true. Inside the city, some of them think they'd actually survive if they decide to give up Mash, but Bogart rejects that idea, be it because he doesn't want to rely on her or that he wants to save her in some way. And he knows even if they did do what they wanted, that the fairy knights and their army would just kill them that much faster. Gawain with her power makes her way through no problem, and while admitting Lancelot is fast, he believes that's all that she's capable of. He decides in this other situation to go get the Black Barrel and use it to fight back. And his assault, it causes many casualties on both sides. With his new power, he thinks he's unstoppable, not aware of the sudden disappearance of the fairy knights. Mash looks in desperation at the damage the weapon has caused, feeling that she has brought harm to the city and the people. But of course, the blast didn't defeat any of the fairy knights, let alone Gawain. Although the blast did give her some iron poisoning, she's all good. And compared to Morgan's Rongominiad, the shot from Black Barrel by Bogart is nothing to worry about. Mash decides to leave and help the people, and Bogart generally thinks about her before continuing his assault. Helping the people, Mash is spotted by some of the knights. She fights back, and that's when Lancelot appears. And even though her shield is strong, it's no match for Lancelot's powerful mystics. That's when Cucaster stops Lancelot from continuing the fight. Mash recognizes him as that white wolf that was with her this whole time, giving Mash a chance to go back and try to help Bogart. Lancelot ends up calling Caster Grimmer the Sage, who was actually a figure from the past history of this Lostbelt, who is now a servant. Arriving at the castle to save Bogart, Mash is confronted with none other than Faye Tristan and Beryl, where Tristan tries out her new fetch skill that Beryl taught her and decides to make that her noble phantasm. Beryl stops her from killing Bogart because he wants to use him as a bargaining chip when Mash arrives. He considers her amnesiac condition, trying to use that to get her to come with him, but a part of her is telling herself to not go with him or trust anything he says. Tristan tries to attack Mash, but it doesn't work out, and Beryl admits that she is not strong enough yet to compete with Mash. Thus why they have Bogart in his tattered state at their disposal. Eventually, they do release Bogart, and Mash dives to save him. Beryl originally attempted to take the Black Barrel, but finds out it's missing. Because Tristan was so infatuated with Beryl, she didn't see who did it or when it happened. Having used all of her strength, Bogart decides to carry Mash through the gate, and he tries to do his best to save as many people as he possibly can in this situation. Meanwhile, the two fairies that she was traveling with, who brought her here, called Rob and Wag, decide to close the gate, saying their goodbye, knowing they are going to die here, and they thank her for everything up to this point because they built a genuine bond and care for her. The survivors are all gathered in the emergency cave Bogart had set up for these type of situations, and they see his final moments and last words to Mash, but he isn't able to finish what he wanted to say. Mash decides the best thing to do is to go to Norwich to stop the calamity and save as many people as she can, and Habitrot comes with her, of course, as well as the wolf. Back with the others, Oberon tells them that he learned that Morgan is apparently charging up a massive amount of energy for a spell, and almost mentions what happened in Sheffield before stopping himself. He thinks Norwich is the best place for them to start looking for more allies, and they save the city to start building Artoria's confidence as the child of prophecy. Gareth, who's been following us this whole time, ever since Gloucester, appears to join our party, wanting to help Artoria, because Artoria gave her the hope that she was actually capable of doing something, even though she doesn't consider herself that strong of a fairy, knowing that her only purpose is to help people. On the way to their destination, Artoria and Gareth show how good they are as a team, where they're confronted with a variety of enemies, one being another wild fairy called Okiku, which was just a sign of what was to come. Before confronting the next issue, they discussed that it would be bad if their carriage was looked over and someone saw there was a human who normally shouldn't be outside, so it's best not to stay in one place for too long. They then run into another wild fairy called Oiwa that they have to handle the same way as the prior one. On the other side of things, we see Woodrose, one of the clan leaders, who is very upset at the current situation of things and how Morgan's forces are handling things without even talking to him. He gets so mad that he ends up killing a human that was just trying to report back doing his job. The Master Group informs Artoria about how pilgrimages work in proper human history and how they aren't just for a particular person, but anyone can take one, and how that's different here, how it's only for the child of prophecy. They then arrive at a broken bridge above the Drake River that has the ability to tempt people with things that they want, testing how much they value their own lives over their desires. So of course, they think it's the best option to go around, but time is of the essence, and you might think it'll be easy to not look down the river, but the group ends up doing so anyway, and most of them are tempted to do so besides Oberon and Muramasa. Muramasa goes down to save the group, where they have to then fight a Drake in the sea, which is their own territory. And apparently Drakes are kind of like mermaids, and because fairies are imitating humans, they are looking for lovers they can have babies, since fairies here don't have babies or nor understand the purpose of it. After defeating the Drake, its domain disappears, and now they have to worry about breathing underwater. They end up washing up off stream, regrouping with Oberon. They then run into one more wild fairy, similar to the previous ones, this one being called Otsuyu. They talk more about the Drake and how they want to have children, meaning fairies lack the ability to reproduce, of course unless the plot demands it. See the video in the card for more about that. And speaking of fairies not being able to have kids, it puts into question the existence of humans here, and disturbingly find out that they are in fact manufactured and produced in some way. With that detour done, the time for the calamity is coming, and what happens here will determine the direction of Artoria's journey moving forward. The group arrives in Norwich, the city that Morgan has left to its own fate, and has previously banned the creation of iron tools where most are created. The group decides to do some sightseeing around the city for a time being, while Da Vinci and the Master look for some clues about the dark clouds and where they could potentially find Mash. After regrouping, they see a crowd centering around Mash, who is being escorted by some Fang clan members working for Spriggan. Spriggan introduces her as the child of prophecy and his special guest. There is no issue in him doing this, considering Morgan has not called for her death, so she is safe at this moment. Mash of course doesn't remember us, and the Master does try to go up to her, hoping she'll remember them, but the old Mash does peer through a bit through her tears. After she is escort away some of Spriggan's guards, who are said to be not as tough as the Olympian soldiers, but still tough nonetheless, try to attack us. This is when someone called the Count's guards end up helping us. The Count being Peperoncino Scandinavia, or Miorengi Aro, one of the cryptors, greeting us friendly as usual. We find out that he's actually a fashion designer here, and he wants to get revenge on Beryl as a member of Team A. We catch up with Pepe telling him about what's going on, and that Artoria is the actual child of prophecy. He's a bit surprised by this because he didn't even know about Mash's situation, considering he has his own things he's worried about. And we found out the people haven't left the city because they value their purposes over their own life. On top of that, they spent everything they had to buy the city back, so they want to keep the land that is theirs. Spriggan, behind their back, actually wants to wait until the calamity happens, and after damage is done, buy it back for a cheaper price. That way he can do whatever he wants to it afterwards. Basically, he's a land shark. We also found out that he wants to keep Mash away from the people so that she doesn't find out what he is truly like, so that she is none the wiser. Later on, Pepe decides to take us out to fight some golems to test our current ability and to help us relax and take our mind off of the Mash situation and everything else. We find out from Da Vinci that Pepe, working for Association, actually did some dirty work before joining Chaldea. He tells her that he was actually a part of a family that practiced the way of the Tengu, and he was eventually banished from the family and decided to kill them all afterwards so that they didn't ruin the lives of any more children, as he saw during his time with them. Pepe has some dark relation to the founder of said family, who is said to have abducted children to pass on their teachings. And Pepe is considered a genius of the family because he mastered 3 arts. One allows him to read minds, the other gives him super speed, and the last allows him to know his own lifespan. That night, Oberon confronts the master, putting into question if we still want to look for Mash, because considering she's taken on the role of Faye Galahad and she hasn't regained her old memories, that this new role may actually be more important than who she was and what she wanted as Mash. But the Master, of course, still has faith. The next day, a big Moors appears, accompanied by many smaller ones. The Moors here actually end up getting bigger when they eat fairies. Pepe orders some of his men to escort the people in the South District to the shelter, since of course no one is going to try to leave the city. The group heads to the South District to fight off the Moors, and spotting the big one, Gareth gets nauseous and vomits looking at it. We find out that Mash is actually heading towards the north to actually fight, as she believes she is a child of prophecy and wants to help the people. The Master tries so hard in the fight that they end up going into near unconsciousness from using too much of their power. The huge Moors eventually gets closer to the bay, which we hear incites fear in some of the other fairies. Arturo looks at the Master's face and wants to be the one to tell her it's okay to run, but seeing Mash move forward, the Master and Da Vinci decide they're going to go too. Knowing Mash can't stop it, she tries her best to mitigate the damage, and she's actually happy to see the Master showing the old Mash is still in there, telling them to run. But the Master uses 3 command spells, and Mash is able to actually block the attack of the big Moors, known as the Calamity of Norwich. Mash finally remembers everything, and with her new power, support from Da Vinci, and the Master, they are able to fight back the Calamity and win. Of course, no thanks to Artoria, but she's still unconfident in her ability at this moment. Mash and Artoria finally meet, but when things are looking good, Morgan decides to use her water mirror, and Mash pushes us out the way, and she ends up disappearing. That's when Harbitride comes in and criticizes us for not realizing what was happening, still not doing anything. Although to our defense, we didn't actually know what Morgan's abilities were, nor what that was. But I guess she assumes we're more aware of this type of stuff. She gives the Master a pep talk and tell her that Mash has been sent somewhere in Fae Britain, which means they just have to look for her again. They end up meeting up with Spriggan, who gives them permission to ring the bell, while Arturia decides she doesn't want to because she's not the one that actually beat the Calamity, and she doesn't feel ready to do so yet, which Spriggan thinks is a smart move. We find out that Morgan had actually invited the Master and the Child of Prophecy to Camelot. Oberon thinks it's a trick, but we find out that because of the way Morgan rules, her words hold weight. She may be a cold and ruthless ruler, but she does follow the rules that she sets for the country, and thus she can't just kill us unless there's a declaration of war or a reason to call for our deaths. And the person that's going to escort us to her is none other than Gawain. In Camelot, Beryl hears about the news from Fae Tristan, but of course Beryl believes in the saying, no body, no death, believing Mash wouldn't go out that way and that she'll come back eventually, some way, somehow.